hmm I would say that it's important to recognize that it takes time to mature a value. And the sooner that we identify, protect, build, maximize, and then are eventually able to harvest the value, the better. So, bringing in a value growth advisor 3 to 5 years from any possible form of transition, that could simply mean bringing a transition, could be an owner taking chips off the table and bringing in an operating partner. Any form of change of control structure of the business really needs to be backed by 3 to 5 years of preparation.
All right, well, welcome to the Fractional Firepower Show. I'm super excited to introduce my guest today, Renee Russo, the founder and CEO of Rise Up Business Coaching, an organization that helps businesses all over add value through their value growth advisory. She's a good friend and colleague of mine, and I'm really excited to have you on the show today, Renee. So, welcome.
Thanks for having me here, Kyle.
All right. So I thought we would just quickly start it off. You're a little bit of a local celebrity here, but why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about yourself, your background, and your own personal entrepreneurial journey?
Absolutely. You could tell by my accent, I'm not Canadian. I did grow up in Australia in a really modest family and started my career in accounting at KPMG. I just happened to be good with double entry, and my high school teacher was like, "You're going to be an accountant." I was like, "Okay, I don't know what that is, but let's do it." Started my career at KPMG and worked in mid-market advisory, insolvency, and transaction services. And I enjoyed the time, but I wanted to get into the minutia of the business and understand it better because my parents worked in public sector jobs, so I never really understand the entrepreneurial landscape. Um, I didn't get that chance to really get my teeth into it. So then I became a headhunter, and I thought the fastest way I'm going to learn about business is to hire talent, put them in jobs, and to see how these businesses tick. But it wasn't until I married an entrepreneur, a Canadian entrepreneur from East Vancouver, that I got my first taste of the thrill and the hardship of entrepreneurship. I immigrated to Canada and I thought I knew a thing or two about business. Turns out I knew very little about the reality of running an entrepreneurial company. We had a business technology business that's still running in Burnaby. And after 10 years of moving through startup and struggle and hostile takeovers, cancer journey, raising 3 kids, I got to a breaking point and I said, it's got to get better than this. We cannot live our life in utter chaos anymore. And fortunately, my brother gave me a copy of Traction that gave me the gift of the entrepreneurial operating system. So I put it to use in our business and stabilized it, stopped the bleeding, and started to gain hope that we could have a life outside of the company and have continued on to be an implementer for nearly 10 years and recently transitioned out of being an EOS implementer into being a value growth advisor. I have a client to thank for that. He said, I want to sell my business and you need to help me. And I told him to take a hike and he told me to figure it out. And so I became a certified exit planning advisor. And now I help founder-led businesses become operationally independent of their owners and help owners realize their freedom to get what they want in business and in life through value growth advisory.
Awesome. Very cool. Thank you for sharing your journey. That's a pretty impressive journey. Lots of ups and downs, I'm sure. So, one of the things that you said that's really kind of stuck out to me is been part of my experience too, is seeing so many of these owners living in that chaos. In fact, I was last night, I went out to an event with one of my colleagues, and he was running an event, and he's been working 18-hour days as an example. How often are you seeing that in your experience doing this for many more years than me, working with business owners? Is it pretty common that these business owners just aren't having a life outside of running their business?
Yeah. It's that grit, that fire, that determination, and that force of the entrepreneur that gets a business off the ground. It's that grit, will, and determination that it gives it life. And then it's their personality and passion and purpose that pulls people in to be part of that business. But as the business grows, The unfortunate reality is business owners struggle to decouple themselves from the day-to-day operations and create the infrastructure necessary to create an operationally independent company. So Dan Sullivan would call that a hub and spoke scenario, that the business owner is at the center of the business. And what we really need to do is educate business owners around how to build self-managing companies that allow them not only to have a life outside the business, but to build value and ultimately wealth down the line. And that's just something that it's kind of like the missing link. And it's what the lack of understanding how to do that is what keeps business owners stuck inside their business. Oh, I was just going to say on that, it's becomes a codependency, Carl. Like I think that the business needs them, but also the business owner needs it because they get the dopamine hit of being, a hero or the knower of many things. It's important for their identity, their self-esteem and sense of purpose. You
Mm,
can still have an identity and purpose and not be so entrenched in your business. It just
right.
requires a bit of a process to get there.
That's really interesting that you say that. I actually had a client I was talking to them about this very recently. They're at that mid-level stage. They've got some really aggressive growth plans, and I was talking with the CEO. He's got his son really well kind of positioned to step in for him at some point. But he was just saying, like, what am I going to do? I don't know. What am I going to do with myself? It's so difficult to imagine, like, I'm not needed in the same way in the business. And he was struggling with that. So I didn't really know the answer because that's not my expertise per se. But what are some of the things process wise that you have seen that have helped these owners overcome that hurdle of, like you said, the dopamine hit and not being needed in the same way that they once were?
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I correlate this to a very natural human journey. At some point, Kyle, your kids are going to grow up and move out of home. And we call that empty nester scenario. And right, some people plan for that and they start to get hobbies and work on their next chapter, and some people don't, and then they fall apart when the kids move out of home. Very similarly, business owners need to be starting these conversations with themselves and their spouse and their key advisors to help them gain the confidence to recognize that they have work to do individually around reclaiming their identity, reconnecting with sense of purpose. And often, I use Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Often they've got to that fourth realm of esteem and they're curious whether there's a fifth
Yep,
realm.
yep.
And the fifth
Hopefully
realm
not too
is
soon.
around self-actualizations, really embodying, your higher purpose, reason for being here. And that is beyond the business. And it's
Mm,
scary. There's a lot of attachment to the money and the showing up at work every day that business owners are used to, and they give themselves the excuse not to do the inner work. But it really is important that they start that discovery process early to reclaim their identity. Mums go through this as well. You birth children, you make sure that they're alive, you kind of abandon yourself, and then suddenly the kids don't, they go to school and they don't need you so much, and you got to do your work to reclaim your identity. So we don't have to look far for very human examples around why this matters. Business owners just tend to hide out a lot longer inside of their business. Unfortunately, as a result of abandoning themselves and making time for life outside of
right.
their business, a lot of their relationships also start to struggle. Relationships with their kids, relationships with their spouse, their lack of friends. So they create this isolation vacuum for themselves. So having the right kind
Mm,
of value growth advisor, partnering up with a business owner is important so that we can start to detangle the business owner
mm,
from the business mentally, emotionally, and give them space to reclaim their identity well in advance of an exit. Up to 75% of exits are considered regretful by business owners within 12 months because the number one reason is they didn't figure out what they were doing next.
mm. So
It's
they have the
important.
breakup with the organization essentially, and then they feel that empty nesters from the business syndrome. I wonder if how many owners or business operators know this in advance. I get the sense with you saying 75% being regretful, they don't know this is even a thing, right? Which I believe, in my experience, a lot of these owners can be hesitant to want to consider even planning for the exit. I imagine those things are connected, that they don't really know the negative outcomes when they leave their business. They're
Mhm.
maybe just thinking, I'll sell my business, I'll have some money, and I'll live the good life, but they're not really thinking about the emotional and all the different connections they have with the day-to-day operating system of running that business for X amount of
Mm.
years.
Mm. We call this readiness work. So we need to get the owner and the business ready for a change of control, whether that's to like, your situation with that client's son or a management buyout or selling or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of work to be done to get the business and the owner ready. So the business owner needs to be doing personal visioning, financial planning, estate planning, de-risking themselves, tax strategies, starting to rebuild their relationships with loved ones that they may have abandoned somewhat. And then the business, they need to be getting the business ready so that it is able to change, control, and thrive. What they don't understand there is if they're not doing the work to create a ready, attractive, and transferable business, their legacy is at stake and their wealth is at stake. And so the risks are extraordinarily high. Up to 50% of exits, Kyle, are involuntary. So a lot of business owners tell themselves, I got time. I'm just going to wait till I'm a retirement age, and then somebody miraculously is going to fall out of the sky, pay me a premium in cash, and set me free. And it doesn't happen like that. It
Right?
requires a lot of methodical, intentional planning around pursuing that strategy. The involuntary exits are not because of anything other than human factors. They're not market. They are death, divorce, disability, disagreement, disillusion, disenchantment. Like we could go on. And the reality is we're not factoring in the reality that business is human
Wow.
and business owners forget what matters most. They do. Because if they're not okay and they're not taking care of their interests, they're actually doing a disservice to their
Right.
teams and their
Right.
stakeholders.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement right there. And I think a lot of business owners might think differently initially on that as to, hey, I'm serving, I'm sacrificing myself for my team, but maybe aren't realizing that by doing so and not taking care of themselves, they're actually hurting their team as opposed
Mm.
to helping them. I think I've seen that a lot with business owners where, they don't really have a choice in a lot of cases, but they see it as I'll fall on the sword. It's my business. I'll take care of it. I'll work the 18 hours and everyone else will be fine.
Mm.
Very, very
Yeah.
interesting.
That piece around, eat leaders eat last. I think it's a double-edged sword, that one, because the reality is then the business owners keep over servicing others, self-sacrificing, abandoning their needs, and in doing so they're telling themselves it's for the greater good, but it's not. And they're also creating this dependency on them. And when you're raising children, you're setting them up for independence to go on and thrive without them. And business owners, through feeling like they're being selfless today, are almost being selfish tomorrow because they're inhibiting that business to move on and prosper and thrive without them.
Point, right?
So,
That's such an interesting analogy. I've never thought of it that way. As raising children, of course, they're going to leave the house one day. You want them to have the skills, the capabilities to go out and survive on their own and independent. But that's such a good analogy looking at the business that way because I think a lot of business owners they don't look at it that way, right? They think it'll just take something will happen and it'll be good to go,
mhm.
which is very very interesting fact. Now, knowing that I see all the entrepreneurs that I work with are they're very busy, right? None of them, due to what we just talked about, they don't have a lot of time in their day to add in additional things. What have you or what tools do you give them or how do you explain to them? You mentioned they have to look at the financial, they have to do estate planning, insurance, there's all these tax planning. It's a big list of things they have to look at. How do you help them overcome that initial, I'm sure, hiccup of I don't have time to do all that?
Um, I am proving out this business in a box, keeping my firm small, and then working with my software partner. It's called Propel Your Business, and EPI, the Exit Planning Institute, to try and get this business model in the hands of more practitioners, because there's of 9,000 exit planning advisors, only 8% practice value growth advisory. It can be hard. So I'm going to prove my business model. Um, I am partnering with my brother on a peer group project for technology service providers. Uh, we have 150 companies in a PE platform that are wanting a peer group solution. So productizing that, and that's post exit. So that's interesting to work on the other side of exit. So, hey,
There's a lot obviously that these owners have to think about, Renee, and in my experience, owners are they're always very very busy, right? Based on these problems, right? They don't have extra hours in the day. And going back to what you mentioned earlier about how these owners they need to plan financials, whether it's tax planning or estate planning or asset planning, and then there's insurance and there's all these other things they need to look at. How do you overcome what I'm sure you get often from these business owners, the obstacles of I don't have time to do all this, right? I might want to look at it and maybe they understand, okay, there's a value here, but they just don't have the time to get into this. What are some of the strategies that you've used to kind of open up that door for them?
hmm a couple of things. The first 90 days of working with a business owner is a discover gate. So we ask a lot of questions, understand how ready they are as an owner, how ready and attractive the business is, understand the value, start to talk about their personal and business vision, and we build a prioritized action plan. So rather than trying to check all the boxes straight away, we look at what's most important personally, financially, and what's most important for the business and build a prioritized action plan. So that'll be looking 3 years out, what do we need to accomplish? 1 year out, what are the goals? And 90 days out, what are the most important rocks or 90-day initiatives? So we break it down into bite-sized pieces. We establish a meeting rhythm to get the wheels turning and maintain a consistent meeting rhythm and measure progress. When the business owner can start to see that they're checking boxes and the enterprise value of their company is going up, they gain more and more confidence and appetite for it. So we have to start slow, create insights, prioritize, and then also we work with their existing advisors and or fill those advisor gaps. So rather than putting the business owner at the middle and they have to maintain all these different relationships, we bring those advisors together
Right,
collectively and working collaboratively. So I remember like I had a double exit, business and marriage at the same time, and it was overwhelming having to deal with the different lawyers and accountants and this and that. And I experienced a lot of fatigue, advisor fatigue. And sometimes their advice didn't add up. One was saying this, another was saying that, and I had a hard time figuring out what to focus on. And so by bringing the advisors together on a cadence allows them to create a
right,
more cohesive narrative and message for the business owner, understand what they need at different times, and make it a lot simpler. We say transitions
right.
are a team sport. We need to start acting that way as advisors.
I'm back. I was only gone for a second. I heard it all. No, that's really interesting. So basically, rather than them having, two, four, six advisors, they've got one point of contact, and to avoid some of that advisor fatigue, if you will. I think that's a great uh, analogy that they're listening to one person. They've got one person that sees the big picture, sees the long term, the short term, and can help them navigate it. So it's not as much of a big bite for them to take, and sounds like it doesn't take up
Mm-hmm.
too much of their time because you're bringing in the appropriate advisors at the right time to help them fill the gaps and plug the holes as they move along.
Mm. And it gives once everybody on that advisor bench knows what the owner wants, knows what the objectives it gives are, there's more context for the advice. I met with a business owner. He's got auto service shops in the Okanagan, and he's looking at some acquisitions and using equity as a form of leadership retention in some of his new acquisitions. And his accountant said, well, if you give equity to key leaders, then they could cause an audit, cause you to have an audit or a review. And he's like doomsdaying this, not recognizing that that owner is actually not going to operate in that business. He needs key leaders to act like owners, and he needs them to stay long term. And in order to accomplish that, small piece equity and or profit distributions or dividends are strategies to secure long-term senior leaders. So working together as advisors and understanding what the owner wants gives better context, so the advice is much more tailored to that client rather than off the cuff.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense, and having those advisors, because they don't necessarily speak to each other, right? I've definitely had clients where there's other advisors, and not knowing that big picture could easily create a conflict like that, which would give then an owner different advice, and then their owner's back to really, do they have an advisor? Because they got two different opinions from so-called experts that are both guiding them in different directions. That's a very, very interesting way of looking at it.
Mhm.
One of the things that you mentioned just a minute ago, I think that's also really important to highlight,
Mhm.
that I don't know that all business leaders think about, is the overall valuation of an organization when these systems, when the business can operate effectively without them in it. You've got a lot of experience doing this. I'm sure you've got a couple success stories, but what have you seen in terms of how the value of the organization significantly increases when they have all these systems in place and can literally step out of the business and the business keeps on keeping on?
Hmm. Yeah, I find that a lot of advisors have like very like table talk around this with business owners and use very generic language around, well, you need an operationally independent company. You got to decentralize yourself, Mark. And Mark's like, okay, great. Well, how do I do that? And that's kind of where the conversation ends with a traditional professional service advisor, accountant, M&A lawyer, different types of coaches and advisors. Working with someone like myself who's been an operator and has worked in the minutia of operating companies, working with their leadership teams, building systems in the company, is really important because we know the how to actually drive value in the business, create operational independence, and de-risk the business and the owner. And so when I'm doing that, I really require a foundational operating system to be in place. That means that the operators can align on a vision with the owner, can hold key seats on an accountability chart, can drive processes, can hit data points, can solve issues. We need a ground floor operating system in place. Above and beyond that, when we're literally measuring enterprise value, we use an approach where we're measuring the health of the business against the range of values for that industry and that business size times the recasted EBITDA. And so we lead with the health and we assess the health of that business through the lens of a buyer. What would a buyer appreciate most? And it's looking for six independent systems being in that business that really shine a light on the level of owner
Right.
independence and speak to the future cash flow potential of that business. Those six drivers are sales. Is there a strong sales system in the business that's independent of the owner? Marketing. Is there a consistent ability to generate new business leads? Financials. Are there strong reporting systems, strong financial acumen, budgeting, cash
Mm.
flow management, basic disciplines in the business? Leadership. Is there a leadership team in place that are acting as guardians and keepers of the business, driving results? Recruitment. Do we have the consistent ability to get the right people in the right seats and scale the human capital with the needs of the business? And productivity. Do we have all the key processes and data points captured and consistently
Hmm.
followed and trained and managed in the business? And another part of that productivity that we're looking at is technology roadmap, AI strategy, tech roadmap. Are we leveraging both human and technology power to create scalable productivity? So that's six key drivers. So we start with an operating system implementation, get the basics in place, and then we're looking at value enhancement through those six drivers. And that's why I partner with you often, because I need to get the owner out of sales. I need a repeatable system. I need a key leader. I need a CRM. I need a sales narrative. And I fundamentally say that the sales engine sells companies, because what a buyer is buying is predictable revenue growth in the future,
Hmm.
cash flow. And the greatest way to de-risk that is to implement a sales system in the business.
I heard 99.9% of your
Hmm.
answer, so
Yeah, yeah.
this is frustrating, but I'm with you. So that's very, very interesting. In my experience, when I look at a lot of the clients I've worked with, they might have two of those six that are dialed in, or maybe only one of those six that are dialed in. So when you talk about it from this perspective, it really adds light into you need to be a couple years out getting ahead of this stuff, right? You can't build it. I can tell you for a fact, you can't build a sales system in less than a year.
Hmm.
Marketing, and if you think about the AI and the automation and technology plan that you talked about, like that's an ever changing target, and I can see now why you
Hmm.
have to have enough time. What have you seen from an ideal perfect world, if you're a business owner, you're thinking, in the next 10 years, I want to exit. When would you suggest they engage at a deeper level with someone like you and start this process?
Hmm. I would say that it's important to recognize that it takes time to mature a value. And the sooner that we identify, protect, build, maximize, and then are eventually able to harvest the value, the better. So bringing in a value growth advisor 3 to 5 years from any possible form of transition, that could simply mean bringing a transition could be an owner taking chips off the table and bringing in an operating partner. Any form of change or control structure of the business really needs to be backed by 3 to 5 years of preparation. Tax strategies alone, from a lifetime capital gains exemptions standpoint, take 24 months to vest. You've got to get your corporate structure, family trust, all those things set up. So that takes a lot of time on the personal and financial planning standpoint. Also, once the business owner understands their wealth gap, they're going to be able to make more confident decisions around how much they invest in the business in order to achieve those valuation points. When I say a wealth gap, I, for example, have a $3 million wealth gap between my life savings now and what I need to retire and live the life that I want. There's a $3 million gap there. So everything that I do now as a business owner is a lot more accelerated and
Oh,
incentivized,
wow.
because I'm now thinking of how I enhance the value of my business to eventually harvest and bridge my wealth gap. So from the personal side, there's a lot
Mm,
of preparation that needs to be done. You do not want to be working with a financial advisor once you've got liquidity. We want you working with them years in advance. And if they don't want to work with you until you got cash, then change your advisor. From the business standpoint, it takes time to, raise a family and get your children
right,
independent, and same with your team. They need time to mature and step up into high levels of leadership and management. We need to, integrate technology into the business, and we need to create these productivity drivers in the company.
right,
Financially speaking, we need 3 strong, confident years of financials looking back, and one confident forward-looking outlook from a budget or
right,
forecast standpoint, in order to truly be
right.
able to tell the financial story and confidently assess the value of the business. So if we're looking back 3 years and your business is, say you've got a $10 million business that is barely profitable now, and a business like that should be a 20% bottom line, you need a year or two to get up. Then you need a few years holding that to be able to get the yield. So 3 to 5 years minimum. And working with an advisor who can quarterback all the different professionals throughout that journey is important. We've worked together on a few engagements before. I was an exit planning advisor or a value growth advisor, and I was basically doing that work back then. I was running EOS, and I was bringing in yourself, a sales system, a fractional integrator for other things, a fractional CFO for that, and I was at the time quarterbacking those advisors. So that advisor, value growth advisor, becomes a through line, the consistent thread, and they can help coordinate the different specialists at different times. You do not have to do it all, but
Wow.
in order to ensure that we get
Wow.
you where you want to go and bridge the value gap where the business is now and where you need it to be to harvest, we need a long-term plan and a consistent
Amazing.
meeting pulse with
Well, this
measurability.
is such an
Yes.
interesting topic, Renee. I think we could probably talk about this for many, many more hours, and I'd love to invite you back maybe in the future to dig into some of these specifics a little bit more. But um, I think it's pretty obvious from our conversation that this is not something that you can delay if you're a business owner. Right? You have to get ahead of it. It's only going to strengthen your business in the long run. And the fact that you mentioned half of business transitions are involuntary should be a fact that every business owner perks up their ears and hears, because that's I don't think a lot of business owners think that, quite frankly.
Mm,
And they just kind of they get up, they do their thing, and they're working hard, and they
mm,
have a bit of a
mhm.
plan, but they're not seeing the big picture. So how would a business owner get a hold of you if they wanted to talk to you about something like this and get the conversation going?
Well, I appreciate you summarizing that. And I want to reinforce that whether a business owner is considering scaling, successioning, or selling, the work around value creation needs to start now. Because when we create that value, we build wealth and value over time that gives owners optionality to
Right.
scale, acquire, to succession, or sell. It gives them choices. If we don't build the value, they don't get the
Right.
choices, and therefore they never realize the freedom that they want. Even if you're a business purchaser, you need to learn to think about the business through the lens of value. So it really is just a basic discipline. We say that exit planning is simply business strategy, and everybody should be doing it. In terms of getting a hold of me, trust is important. So I encourage people to seek me out on LinkedIn, hear my narrative, hear my story. You'll see that I didn't just start this conversation yesterday. It's been a long process. So you can build trust with me there. And then my website is riseupbc.com, riseupbc.com. I also read a book. It's called readytoriseBook.com, or the book is called Ready to Rise, and that's the website. So if I feel like if I could get every business owner thinking about
Right.
what one thing, it would be, what do I want? And writing that book was a vehicle for me to start to open up that dialogue with more business owners before they find themselves in a catastrophe,
Mm.
an adverse situation, back against the wall. I want them to be um, thinking about what they desire in business and in life, building those plans, de-risking
Right.
themselves, and setting themselves up to realize that freedom, and moving from income thinking to value creation
Amazing.
is the path to
Well,
freedom
you
for
do
every
some
business
wonderful
owner.
work out there, Renee. It's very complex, but you clearly know what you're talking about. So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to have a chat with us. It was a pleasure having you on the show, and I look forward to having you on the show at a future date and to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kyle.